All right, let's dive into something that's kind of like a ghost story. It's a story about these phantom signals that haunt our DNA, and they influence who we are from the very beginning. We're talking about epigenetics, the ghost in your genes.
So let me just start with a question for you. Do our genes have a capacity to memorize? I mean, can they actually remember things that happened long, long before we were even born? It sounds like something out of science fiction, right? But it's a very real question that scientists are digging into right now.
Just think about that for a second. The experiences of your grandparents, what they ate, the air they breathed, the stress they were under, all of that could be imprinted on your biology today, decades later. It could be shaping your health in ways that are subtle, but incredibly powerful. So this isn't just some cool, abstract idea, right? It's a whole field of science, and it suggests that our genes literally have a memory, a way of recording the world and then passing that information down. But how on earth does that memory actually work? Okay, so to really get this memory thing, we've got to be super clear on the difference between genetics and epigenetics. Genetics, that's your body's permanent blueprint. It's the actual sequence of your DNA. It's written in ink. Epigenetics, on the other hand, is like all the notes and highlights written in pencil all over that blueprint. It doesn't change the blueprint itself, but it totally changes how it's read.
You know, the late great biologist Dr. Alan Wolfe, he just nailed it. He defined epigenetics as the heritable changes in how our genes are expressed that happen without a single change to the underlying DNA sequence. It's all about which genes get turned on and which get turned off.
Right. So we're going a layer deeper than the DNA sequence itself. We're getting into the world of gene regulation, where the body has these incredibly sophisticated tools to control which parts of its genetic blueprint it's actually going to use at any given time.
So the big question is, how in the world does the body actually write these notes on our DNA? Well, it turns out it mainly uses two really remarkable molecular tools. Let's get into the first mechanism, and I want you to picture this. Imagine a dimmer switch for every single one of your genes.
This first tool is called DNA methylation. It's the most studied epigenetic mechanism out there, and honestly, that dimmer switch analogy is perfect. It lets the body turn the volume of a gene up or way down, or even just shut it off completely.
So here's how it works, and it's actually pretty brilliant. Tiny little chemical tags, they're called methyl groups, they physically latch onto the DNA, and they tend to stick to these specific spots near a gene's on switch. Now, when one of these spots gets covered in a lot of tags, it basically just silences that gene. It physically blocks the machinery that's trying to read the DNA. The dimmer switch has been turned all the way down. And what makes this whole system so dynamic? It all comes down to copying. See, when your cells divide, they have to copy both the DNA and all these epigenetic marks. But the copying process for the marks, it's only about 96% accurate. Now, compared to how perfectly DNA gets copied, that little bit of sloppiness is actually a feature. It allows for change and variation over time. Okay, so that's the dimmer switch. The second major tool is something called chromatin remodeling. If methylation is the dimmer switch, you can think of this as the actual physical storage system for your DNA. See, your DNA isn't just floating around in your cells. It's incredibly long, so it has to be packaged up. It's tightly wound around these little protein spools called histones. And this packaging, this is key. Epigenetic marks act like little signals that tell these spools to either loosen their grip, which makes the DNA accessible, open for business, or to tighten up, packing the DNA so densely that the genes are closed and totally unreadable. It's a whole other way to control which parts of the blueprint are even visible. Okay, so we've got these incredible molecular tools, dimmer switches, dynamic packaging, but why does any of this matter? Well, this is where it gets really profound. The real-world consequences touch everything, from how we develop to our health and even to evolution itself. First up, development. I mean, think about it. Every single cell in your body, whether it's a neuron in your brain or a cell in your skin, has the exact same DNA blueprint. So why are they so different? Epigenetics. Different sets of genes are switched on or off, and that's what tells a cell, hey, you're going to be a heart cell and not a brain cell. It's literally the foundation of how you build a complex organism. And then there's your health. These systems are absolutely critical. But yeah, when they mess up, the results can be really serious. For example, a lot of cancers get their start when epigenetic mistakes accidentally silence our tumor suppressor genes. The very genes whose whole job is to stop cells from growing out of control. And this is where it comes back to you. Your environment, your lifestyle, the food you eat, your stress levels, what you're exposed to, all of it can leave epigenetic marks on your DNA. For example, certain nutrients are essential for just creating those methyl tags we talked about. These changes can then influence your health for your entire life by subtly changing which of your genes are active. And if we zoom all the way out to the biggest picture possible, epigenetics is actually changing how we think about evolution itself. These epigenetic changes, or epimutations, can happen way, way faster than traditional DNA mutations. And because we're learning they can sometimes be passed down to the next generation, they might be a kind of rapid response system for organisms to adapt to a changing world. So when you put it all together, it really forces us to look at that old nature versus nurture debate in a whole new light. Epigenetics shows us they aren't fighting each other. No, they're in a constant, dynamic conversation. You know, the guy who actually came up with the word epigenetics way back in 1942, Conrad Waddington, he already got it. He described it as the interaction between our genes and our environment, the very process that makes us who we are.
And this, right here, is probably the most powerful takeaway from all of this. Your genes, they are not your destiny. Think of them more like a script, full of potential lines and scenes. But your experiences, your environment, your choices, you're the director, deciding which lines get spoken and which scenes actually get played out.
Which leaves us with one last thought, one last question for you. If your life experiences can really influence the way your genetic script is read, if you are, in a very real sense, the director of your own genetic story, what story will you tell?